Welcome, LA Progressive friends and family and readers and viewers. Okay, so Dick and I'm Sharon Kyle. This is Dick Price. We publish and edit the LA Progressive. And so for many years, Reverend Irene Monroe has contributed her pieces, which we felt so fortunate to have because she has such a unique voice. But today is actually the first time that we're meeting face to face.
That's right.
Reverend Irene Monroe is a member of the LGBTQIA community. She is a theologian. She is an advocate for so many of the issues that we support here at the LA Progressive, and we're just honored to have her writings. And she's going to talk to us today about President Jimmy Carter being her first. So, should I call you Reverend Irene?
You call me Irene
Irene,
because
tell
we're peers. We're
we are
peers.
we are peers, and we learn. When you wrote this piece, Reverend Jimmy Carter was my first too.
Yeah.
Voting age being lowered in 1976 when he ran, I could vote, and I was so excited about my first time voting for the President of the United States, and I really felt honored for him to be that first one, and I continue to feel that way throughout his life. So let's talk about this piece.
All right. Thank you. But before we begin, may I just say I would be remiss not to thank both you and Dick for taking my columns. You folks welcome me in ways that churches would not. And we got to understand we've moved quite a bit from the 90s when you first started out. We weren't accepting of a whole lot of stuff, gay marriage, don't ask, don't tell. I mean, just a number of things, and certainly queer religious folks. I mean, that was certainly an oxymoron. So I would be remiss not to give kudos and thanks to you because you open your pages in ways that churches, even today, will not.
Thank
Thank
Well, it's been an honor to publish you all these years. It has been a long time, and we love getting your articles, and we're so happy that we made the connection. And actually, after what 20 years, we see each other face to face, sort of
Yeah.
face to face.
Yeah. So
Right.
your Christian positions, one of the reasons that I found you so attractive is that we have watched the far right wing Christian white, I'm going to be clear here, white Christian nationalists hijack what it means to be Christian. And that's why it's so important for me to provide a platform to you. There is another Christianity that I'm familiar with, and I was just saying before we started recording, the red letters of the Bible
That's
are the letters that are the most important. So since you are a theologian and you do have reverend in front of your name, can you talk a little bit about how this the gap between progressive Christians and the white Christian nationalists?
Well, it's very, very interesting because in many ways it's has resurfaced. It's not unnew. We
Mm,
got to remember a few things that American slavocracy was built
mm,
and sanctioned on the Bible. It's the whole notion that we, meaning you and I, Sharon, and you, Dick, too, because you are a big advocate for Black liberation here. And I need to say, I watched a particular piece of you too, because you challenged Dick that no, you must have some slave. How could you be white in America and not have slave roots? And I just say kudo, you're what we call a good white man, okay? And Sharon, you married a good white brother. But what I want to say, though, is that we got to understand that the Bible has always been used to solidify discrimination. It was profound in terms of slavery. That's why we have the Southern Baptists and then the split. That's why we have the split in a number of denominations here, because we were considered children of a lesser God. And so with that kind of notion, it's about what form of Christianity do you really subscribe to? So clearly, what we see here today when we talk about Christian nationalism, oh gosh, we're really talking about four components of it. We're talking about an identity, okay? because you don't have to be a churchgoer to say now that you're a Christian nationalist. We're talking about geography, mostly the South and Midwest. But I need to say this, we have it up here too. And I always tell people, one of the things that I do in making the distinction between the North and South is that it's the Mason-Dixon line. If you're below it, you're down South. And if you up here where I am, it's up South. So we got some Christian nationalists up here as well. But when you're talking about it, you're talking about an identity, you're talking about geographical location, you're talking about a politic, and you're really talking about an ideology of white heterosexual, white heterosexual supremacy here that excludes people of color, LGBTQ issues around abortion, anything but them. How about them? Anything but them. And then Donald Trump, in many ways, and I think this is an interesting, juxtaposition, and I think you both would agree with me here. We're talking about Jimmy Carter in light of a person who will soon occupy the White House, who just today was convicted of a felon. You know, and the thing that gets me about this is that if you're convicted of a felon, you can't work at Mickey D's. But yet this guy this guy is going to occupy the highest office. And I think what's so interesting, if we juxtapose, Carter to Trump here, Malachi 6 is Carter's, favorite passage in the Bible. And it says, do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with God. And he did this. Now, Trump, he's selling Bibles for $59.99 on the internet, okay, and on his social platform, okay? And he says that his favorite passage is 2 Corinthians, and anybody who reads the book or ever been to church or heard a minister use or preach from that book, it is 2 Corinthians. But I'm just saying the juxtaposition, okay, it is glaring.
It really is. I caught snippets. I didn't watch the entire Jimmy Carter funeral, but in looking at the funeral and the past presidents sitting there, it's so clear, that they have no respect. All of the other presidents and first ladies have no respect for Donald Trump. But I thought, they must think that democracy is really not a good thing, because he's now president again because the vast majority of Americans, or a small majority of Americans,
enough to get him, yeah.
They voted for him.
Mm-hmm.
And the Christian community, white evangelical Christian community, stuck with him. That to me is so perplexing.
And 52% of white women, let's not forget about that. In a time that now, so we were kids when 1973 came along and it was Roe v. Wade. And I tell you not, I would have bet my last dollar, okay, that was one that would never be overturned. And we saw over time the chipping and gnawing away of it.
Yeah, that's right.
And we saw that with voting rights too.
Absolutely. So let's talk about Jimmy Carter, because he, in my opinion, of all the presidents, he was the one who embraced and projected what true Christianity more than any other president. Even though all of them say that they're Christians, Jimmy Carter was the one who actually embraced it and walked the walk and talked the talk.
Yes, he did.
With one little exception, and that was not in confronting his segregationist father. But you have a paragraph where you talk about that. And I was interviewed right after his death, and I brought that up as well. But in all other respects, he was really what you would think would embody Christianity in the form of a president.
Right. Well, I need to say this here because he's the son of a segregationist. I call him Jimmy the Baptist. And the reason, and compare him to John the Baptist. You see, because John the Baptist spoke the truth and got his head chopped off. And in many ways, metaphorically, so did Jimmy Carter. He did something that, a lot of people were not happy about. He had the Camp David Accords. Now, not everybody, and if we remember, shortly after that, Sadat was assassinated here. And he was known to be very candid. He did not he was really the outsider. He was the outsider because he was candid. He said during his candidacy he would never tell a lie. We're coming off of Tricky Dicky. If you could, I mean, if for a younger generation, it was like, what am I talking about? But it was the Watergate scandal, and then we get Gerald Ford, who was never elected president or vice president, and because Spiro Agnew, okay, also needed to resign, and understandable. So here he comes, a very honest man, in many ways a country bumpkin,
Mhm.
and 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 it was really interesting because I really felt that he had a conversion experience in the way that I feel Dietrich Bonhoeffer did. He was around Black people. And
Mhm.
what I mean by that is that that farm that he grew up was in a predominantly Black area. His father was a pro-segregationist, but he let his child play with Black kids. That makes a difference because that's where you begin to see, that needed sort of, I call grooming, to begin to see God in all of us, see that we are all of equal worth. But it was that, and also he says this here in his book Faith, which is, I'm telling you, he's better than any theologian I've studied, other than King and a few others. But he said that it was going to the Black church that he saw the manifestation of the Spirit. And
Mhm.
that was the same thing that Dietrich Bonhoeffer did. See, folks, he went to Union Theological Seminary. This is where went and got my master's before going up to Harvard for the doctorate. But Dietrich Bonhoeffer used to worship at Abyssinian Baptist Church with Adam Clayton Powell Sr.
Mhm.
Okay, and this is during the jazz era, flappers. I mean, so he's hanging black. He's hanging black. So that when he comes back into New York City and asks Adam Clayton Powell Sr., what should I do? He said, your work is not here, although you can be a symbol for what's going on in Germany around, Nazism, but you need to be with the people. And that's why he went back to Germany. I say this again to compare him to Jimmy. Jimmy understood why. I'm not surprised that his beginnings is Plains, Georgia, and his ending is Plains, Georgia, because when he left the White House, he went back to teach Bible
Yeah,
study at
yeah,
the church. See, so what that is that what's what we call liberation, Black liberation theology.
that's right.
Someone asked me, and I know don't ever get a minister to talk as I go on. But I just want to say one other thing. People say, how could people be these kind of Christians? Well, there's an intentionality because if Black liberation theology was canon, okay, was we all be free.
That's
We
right.
all
Oh
be
my
free.
gosh. Oh, there's so much that you can. We have to do a second conversation about that because I want to give Dick an opportunity to weigh in. So far, I've just been
Yes, yeah.
going on.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Dick.
No, 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 that's okay. No, I mean, I understand.
Did you want to say anything about your great 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 uncle?
I could, yes, I could. We belong to a thing called Coming to the Table, which brings in the ancestors of enslavers along with the ancestors of the slave, and they try to come together and heal together. And I tagged along with Sharon, although I didn't think that I came from any long line of enslavers. I knew that several of my lines came here after the Civil War, but there was one line that could be, and Sharon came back from a conference and she spent hours digging in. She likes ancestry.com, and she was
That's
looking,
right.
she was going to find the slave master in my heritage.
That's
And
right.
and instead she found a great uncle of mine who was so upset about slavery and was inspired by a Black woman, I can't remember who it was, that got a boat and he went and freed slaves. He freed like dozens of slaves, I believe, along the Ohio River. He was caught for it. He spent 17 years in prison.
He was whipped.
He
He
was
took the
whipped and
lash.
beaten, and then he got out. He went right back to it.
Mhm.
freed some more.
Yeah.
So
And
so I
served time again.
so
Was
I
he part of the Underground Railroad
Well, we don't
of
know.
that?
Right.
Mhm.
All we know is that, according to this historian, his ancestor, and Dick, you were the descendants, his ancestor took it upon himself. So
right.
I don't know that he was part of
Oh,
any kind of organized
I
effort.
got you. I got you.
Got this boat, and he met a woman who was enslaved and who had escaped through the Underground Railroad, and she was on a speaking tour, which oftentimes was happening in order to get
My
more
God.
people to understand what was
Mhm.
happening in the South with the slaves and the enslaved people. And when he heard the stories, he couldn't believe it. And he said, "Well, I'm putting an end to this." And he went and got his own boat and did it himself.
But
So
you have excavated some history that needs to be told because, see, we only understand it within the context of organized,
Right.
subversive activity like the Underground Railroad. But you know what? You open up a cannon to make us think there how many more were like that.
That's right.
well, we
Individuals.
don't know that he wasn't part of
We
the
don't know.
underground. She didn't find
Mhm.
Ancestry.com didn't tell her that much. But I was happy what it told her because I like to bring it up, every once in a while.
And you got listen, you got bragging rights, right, Sharon?
Yeah.
Now you
Yeah.
really do because when I watched that video, I said, I'm like you, like and it's like, all right.
He got
So
bragging right, but he still has to pay reparations
so
because he
so
still benefited.
so back to Jimmy Carter. I was in DC when he was defeated. Uh,
Oh,
and I was on Capitol Hill, and I was a bartender in a bar where a lot of politicos hung out, and I got to see all the Republicans puff out their chests, and I was just crushed. I didn't buy it that he was a bad president. I did think and proved to be true that the Republicans cheated him, pulled a fast one with the Iranian hostages.
thank you.
And
Thank you.
and how much exactly does a president control inflation? Yeah, that was bad. That was bad. But, was it his fault? But what I admired more than anything was the way he held himself. Now, people complain that he wore sweaters at work. I'm from Minnesota. People wear sweaters to work. I mean, and then in all this film, they're showing. I learned all these new things about him. He published 32 books.
I know.
You
Oh
know,
my God.
he wrote books of poetry, all
Yeah,
post-presidency.
yeah,
He made furniture with his hands
yeah.
into his 90s. We all know about Habitat for Humanity, but and he was supposedly an excellent tennis player, an excellent softball player. I mean, he truly was a Renaissance
He's an
man.
excellent
He
thing.
was an idol for the populace in the way that it's hard to know who else would be like that. Maybe Barack Obama, maybe, but
Mhm.
I can't think of any others.
Yeah. So the only one funny thing that I found out about him that I think is a piece of trivia is that he and Berry Gordy have a common
That,
ancestor.
that's right. You saw that with Skip Gates. Okay, finding your roots.
Yes, like they either a great grandfather or a great great grandfather, but it could be a great grandfather because they both Jimmy Carter was 100 years old, so his great grandfather was actually an enslaver and fathered a child with a woman that he enslaved, and that child became an ancestor of Berry Gordy's.
Very goodies. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I'm just amazed when I read that, because he's seen a lot of history, 1924, that
Mhm.
he's the first to be born in a hospital. You go, oh, well, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that. It kind of helps you to see how 100 years really isn't a very long time. My grandmother was born in 1909 and she died in 2009.
Oh, okay.
And I've learned a lot of, I mean, and I'm her first grandchild, and we were very close. And so, I was a part of her life. But then when I started doing a lot of research into my ancestry tree, I learned some very painful truths about her and the Great Migration. She was born in Durham, North Carolina, and her parents left Durham, North Carolina during the Great Migration in the teens, like 1913, 1912. And one of her brothers died of starvation. He was 3 years old. And I learned all this pulling up death certificates through ancestry.com. You know, so much of the documentation has been scanned into their database. But she never talked to me about what that was like.
Wow. Wow. But you can imagine, though. We can imagine.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's such a pleasure to chat with you. And I do want to get back and talk about liberation theology.
Well, I look forward to it. I think all three of us can lollygag for hours.
I think so. I think so. Well, Reverend Irene Monroe, thank you again for contributing all of the pieces that you've contributed over the years. I don't know how many years it's been, but I'm thinking more
It's
than
been 2 decades.
yeah, yeah.
It's been and I thank you. And I really want your audience to understand when we're talking about the 90s, you folks open your pages where many churches even today will not let me walk in.
Yeah.
You absolutely have a standing open invitation to make contributions to the LA Progressive. Everyone needs to have this perspective. Thanks again.
Thank you, and be safe out there, please. My prayers go with.
Thank you for sticking around. If you like the LA Progressive content and the discussions we have here, please consider clicking the subscribe button below and also give us a thumbs up. That helps to grow our audience by feeding the algorithm, which helps to get this content in front of more eyes. Thanks for stopping by. We really appreciate your support.